All right now, come on, DL Hughley. That's what I'm talking about, y'all. DL Hughley, he is speaking up for Nolan Wells, and he has a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, and they all are valid. I want y'all to hear this, brother, because he's really bringing it. You know, everybody's looking at that video that they did with Brandon Tatum, and nobody's believing the bull crap. You know, everybody have more questions, and the more they talk, the more they just put the nail in the coffin for them. So I got this video. D.L. Hughley is speaking, and also they're talking about more about the case, the autopsy, and really what's coming and why is it taking so long. Like, let's speed this up. We want answers. We're not letting up. So I want you guys to watch this and like, share, and subscribe, and comment. Tell me your thoughts.
Nolan Wells was murdered.
I do.
You do.
100%.
I think that Mississippi's gonna be Mississippi. I think that Black people are right to question all of the circumstances that have arisen. You have a young man, and almost everything we know about this case, we know because Black people wouldn't let it go.
Can a suspect be protected by silence for over 24 hours, even when facing a series of unusual actions and controversial audio recordings? Recently renowned comedian and activist D.L. Hughley spoke out, pulling back the curtain on the powerful parents alleged to be shielding those present on that fateful trip. The investigative deadlock may not stem from a lack of evidence, but rather from a solid wall of power in the background. Let's break down the hidden angles, the abnormal silence, and the shocking revelations from D.L. Hughley right now. The Horn Island Mystery. 4 went out, 3 came back. Let's go back in time to July 4th, Independence Day. Nolan Wells, a vibrant 18-year-old, boarded a boat with 3 friends heading out toward Horn Island. A photo taken on the boat that day captured a moment of young people smiling under the summer sun. Yet when the sun set and the boat docked back on shore, only 3 returned. Nolan Wells was nowhere to be found. According to initial reports, the group claimed that Nolan made a spontaneous decision to stay behind on the deserted island around 3 p.m., simply to keep chatting with a girl he had just met. It's an explanation that might sound simple at first, but it raised a massive red flag for the victim's family. In a media interview, Nolan's father firmly insisted he would never believe his son would willingly stay behind on a remote, deserted island with no way to get back. 2 days later, on the morning of July 6th, the family's worst fear came true. Park rangers discovered Nolan Wells's body adrift just off the coast of Horn Island. When an unexpected loss or suspicious incident occurs, every single detail can be the key to unlocking the truth. In the case of Nolan Wells, forensic experts and investigators all point to one central question. How did Nolan Wells end up in the water? Did he jump in voluntarily to swim? Was he knocked overboard in a tragic accident, or even worse? Was he forced or pushed off the boat into deep waters? The exact way Nolan went from the deck into the water is the critical link that determines the entire nature of the case. Was this a tragic drowning accident, or a wrongdoing that has been covered up? The mysterious audio and disappearing evidence. D.L. Hughley calls out the truth, the most haunting and explosive turning point in the entire Nolan Wells case centers on an emergency audio recording from the open sea, where the line between a tragic accident and a serious offense begins to blur. As audio technicians filtered through layers of ocean noise and roaring wind, the hidden soundscape beneath was revealed, sending chills down the spines of millions following the story. It wasn't just a routine distress call for a sinking boat. Behind the calls for rescue echoed broken fragments of sheer panic. D.L. Hughley directly pointed out a shocking detail. Listen closely to that enhanced audio. While they're calling for help, claiming the boat is taking on water, you can clearly hear Nolan in distress in the background, followed immediately by a menacing voice shouting, "Shut your mouth!" But instead of providing a reasonable explanation, those involved turned around and made threats against the brave woman who cleaned up that audio track. This recording immediately sparked a fierce legal debate. Were those chaotic yet threatening background voices enough to establish probable cause for a judge to sign an emergency arrest warrant? In criminal procedure, law enforcement doesn't need crystal clear absolute proof just to detain individuals for questioning. So why in this particular case did authorities choose such an unusual silence? That baffling question reached a fever pitch when D.L. Hughley zeroed in on the disappearance of key medical findings in the independent post-mortem review. Think about it using basic logic. The simplest way for officials to rule this an accident is to prove there was water in his lungs. If there was, they would have instantly announced a drowning to close the case. Deliberately withholding the most critical findings needed to determine the cause of death is the clearest sign that something isn't right. Why haven't authorities brought everyone in for a proper interrogation? The threatened audio fragments combined with withheld critical biological findings have shifted this case from a suspected accident to a massive question mark regarding a cover-up. The wall of silence from the investigation is no longer seen as standard procedure. It is now at the center of a growing wave of public outrage demanding justice for Nolan Wells. Sealed post-mortem report, and the mystery of missing biological evidence. The biggest and most infuriating deadlock in the Nolan Wells case currently surrounds the irregularities in the post-mortem findings, a process that should have provided the most scientific and precise answers regarding the tragic loss of this young man. In reality, the initial examination conducted by state officials was completed as early as July 7th, shortly after Nolan's body was discovered off Horn Island. However, despite confirmation that the findings were finalized by late July, local authorities decided to place a full hold on the report, refusing to release any information to the public. This baffling silence forced Nolan's family to seek an independent second review. Yet the outcome of this independent assessment uncovered an even more shocking reality. Key biological samples and essential body tissues were completely missing and not handed over for the independent medical team to examine. This detail not only deeply distressed the family, but also left the public questioning whether evidence was being mishandled behind closed doors. From a legal standpoint, withholding the official state findings relies heavily on a procedural loophole. By classifying the case as an open investigation or a potential homicide inquiry, a category with no statute of limitations, the law places no strict deadline on when law enforcement must disclose case files. Even Freedom of Information Act FOIA regulations contain exemptions, allowing documents to remain sealed as long as a case remains active. This mechanism inadvertently creates a formidable legal wall, enabling investigators to keep critical evidence out of public sight indefinitely under the guise of confidentiality. But it leaves everyone with a crucial question. Is this prolonged silence truly aimed at protecting the integrity of the investigation, or has it become an unintentional shield hiding facts that someone doesn't want brought to light, calling out the suspicious behavior of the best friends? Beyond the legal ambiguities, the conduct and attitude of those on board with Nolan Wells on that fateful trip to Horn Island have also become a major focus of public scrutiny. In particular, the actions of two companions, Warren Hudson and Jax Patalow, have left behavioral analysts raising significant red flags. Recently, Warren and Jax returned to Horn Island, the last location where Nolan was seen alive. However, this visit was far from a personal or private one. They appeared alongside their personal defense attorneys and media representatives to conduct their own independent investigation. The presence of legal counsel directly at the scene painted a tense picture of extreme caution. Most notable were the observations made by body language experts and behavioral psychologists regarding Warren Hudson. Despite repeatedly asserting that Nolan Wells was his best friend, practically a brother. Warren's actions told a completely different story. A baffling absence, Warren failed to show up at his close friend's funeral service. Cold detachment at the scene. Upon stepping back onto the exact spot where his friend vanished, Warren displayed no noticeable shift in voice. No signs of grief, remorse, or attempt to hold back emotion. Psychological reactions that are entirely natural for anyone who recently suffered a devastating loss. Misplaced focus, rather than reflecting on the events or memories involving Nolan Warren, appeared surprisingly relaxed, proactively discussing trivial details like boat rental expenses. From the perspective of criminal psychology and behavioral specialists, this pattern of behavior is considered highly unusual. A distinct lack of emotional resonance paired with an avoidance of elements tied to the victim often serves as a key warning sign, fueling growing public skepticism about the truthfulness of their account. D.L. Hughley, and exposing the term best friend. In the dark picture of the case, what makes D.L. Hughley most outraged and unsettled isn't just the investigative questions, but the carelessness of labeling the group of people traveling with Nolan Wells as friends. If Nolan could rise from the grave right now, he would be furious at those lies, D.L. Hughley bitterly declared. As people grow up, they come to realize the true cost and worth of the word soulmate. Someone who claims to be a best friend, practically a brother yet, just 2 weeks after the tragedy occurs, is completely absent from his friend's funeral. Not a single tear, no sign of grief. Not even a bit of psychological guilt, wondering if they bear any responsibility for that death. D.L. Hughley asserted, "They can call themselves acquaintances, casual friends, or teammates on the field, but do not impersonate the word friends, because when you truly have a genuine friend, no barrier or fear can stop you from saying your final goodbye." Clearly, not a single true friend was present on that fateful trip. Delving into the local authorities' handling of the case, D.L. Hughley made a bitter yet realistic observation. Mississippi is going to be Mississippi. The black community has plenty of historical and practical reasons to doubt every move made by authorities. Just look back at the entire case. All the crucial evidence keeping the case from fading into oblivion came from the desperate efforts of the victim's family and the community themselves. Nolan's mother had to go out and recover her son's phone and keys on her own. A young black woman in the audio industry had to personally clean up every layer of background noise so the public could hear the hidden cries for help. The ambiguity and disregard for the value of black lives have become a hard-to-heal historical scar in this state. From the tragedy of Medgar Evers, which took 31 years and 3 trials to finally secure justice, to the shocking event where 215 bodies of black individuals were found buried in unmarked graves behind a local police station without anyone being notified. Why should we trust a system with a history so full of doubt? D.L. Hughley questioned. The only reason the truth about Nolan Wells hasn't been buried under the dust is because his family and the black community refuse to ever let go. Probable cause. Is it enough to make an arrest? An arrest warrant does not require absolute proof as needed for a conviction in court, that is the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. What police and prosecutors need at this stage is merely probable cause. You only need to gather enough logical facts for a reasonable professional to believe that a crime likely occurred and that this specific individual is directly involved in it. That is precisely why, in the interview, former Judge Carlos Moore offered a heavy-hitting assessment. If you aggregate all the publicly available information from the mysterious audio recording to the series of behavioral abnormalities, I would feel completely comfortable if law enforcement presented the names of the suspects. Based on what is known, I wouldn't hesitate to sign an arrest warrant right at this moment. But let's slow down for a moment to view this from multiple angles. If issuing an arrest warrant based on reasonable suspicion has such a strong foundation, what is truly holding investigators back? Let's turn around and ask the questions that any judicial system must weigh. What if authorities arrest the wrong person, who will take responsibility for stripping a citizen of their freedom based merely on suspicions and an audio clip that cannot be 100% verified? Should a person be detained while physical evidence is still under debate? The crux of the matter here is not asserting they are definitely guilty. The tension building to a climax is the question. Do investigators already have enough cause to move from suspicion to action? And if it is enough, what is the real reason they are still standing still? If you look at each detail individually, one could easily wave it off as a coincidence. But when you put all the puzzle pieces together in chronological order, a picture filled with massive question marks begins to emerge. The series of abnormalities after Nolan's disappearance. Right after the incident occurred a detail that left many astonished was that Ashley Cole, someone involved in the matter, allegedly moved quickly to delete or deactivate all of her social media accounts. The reason given later was to protect her children from threats. However, what raised public suspicion was the timeline. On July 4th, when information about the incident had not yet spread widely, what drove someone to feel that their family's safety was under such urgent threat that they had to swiftly erase all digital footprints on social media? Following that was the move by the group of youths who accompanied Nolan. They reportedly sought legal counsel within the very first few days on July 4th and July 5th. It must be clearly stated that within the legal system, retaining a lawyer is a completely legal and legitimate constitutional right for anyone. Anyone has the right to protect themselves against legal trouble. However, the question raised here is not whether they have the right, but rather if they were merely witnesses to the tragic disappearance of their friend. What prompted them to feel the immediate need to erect a legal shield? The third detail is perhaps the piece that generates the most debate from a psychological standpoint. On the morning of July 5th, while law enforcement and Nolan's family were exerting all efforts searching for him along the shore and off the coast of Horn Island, this group of youths was seen having breakfast together at a restaurant IHOP Chew Waffle House. Place these two images side by side. On one side is the desperate search for a close friend missing at sea. On the other side is a routine, casual meal at a dining table. Is that a sign of apathy, a normal psychological reaction when people cope with shock in different ways? Or does it conceal a far more suspicious attitude? It is precisely this series of consecutive abnormal behaviors, not just one, but multiple actions occurring within a short time frame, that has left the public unable not to question what truly took place on that boat that day. The mystery of the search night. Why didn't they return by boat? If there is a moment that brings anyone following this case to tears, it is the helpless pain of the parents on the night of July 4th. Nolan Wells's father once shared in bitterness just how desperate he was as he tried to find a boat to head out to sea that very night to search for his son. But he had no means of transportation and could not navigate the waves to Horn Island on his own in the middle of the night. It is from that exact pain that a massive question has taken root in the public's mind. Did the companions with Nolan that day have access to a boat? If they had a boat and knew their friend was still on that deserted island, why wasn't a single return trip made immediately that night? There are many technical reasons that could be offered to explain this. Could dark nighttime weather conditions, high waves, and the risk of running aground near Horn Island have made returning to search too dangerous and impossible? Or was it simply panic among young adults, or was there another reason hidden behind that delay? CBS News once confirmed a crucial detail. Nolan Wells's family absolutely does not buy the scenario that he voluntarily stayed behind on the island alone in the dark, with no means of transport. To them, that was abnormal behavior completely out of character for Nolan. However, in the principles of criminal investigation, we cannot rush to conclude that not returning by boat equals guilt. Emotional assumptions are never justice. This is not an accusation. This is a technical question that must be answered with data A, detailed timeline for each individual. GPS tracking data from the boat and mobile devices. Detailed statements cross-referenced under the supervision of investigative authorities. Only when this factual data is made public will the haunting question of the night of July 4th finally receive a satisfactory answer. Family and power. Does social status change the process? After going through a series of abnormal behaviors from the group of youths present on that fateful trip, public attention began to shift toward another aspect, one that many believe is the cause behind the case's slow and mysterious movement, the family background of those involved. In media discussions and analytical news reports covering the case, the backgrounds of this group's families have been repeatedly brought to light. Their parents are far from strangers in the local community. They include a dentist and an emergency room doctor, a pain management specialist, and even a judge currently serving in the judicial system. These are all individuals who possess high social status, strong financial resources, and extensive networks within the local government apparatus. It is precisely the emergence of these heavy-hitting titles that has raised a barrage of questions regarding the transparency of the investigation. However, from a legal and journalistic perspective, we must draw a very clear boundary between emotional speculation and investigative facts. We cannot assume or state flatly that the parents intervened to protect criminals. That is a statement lacking legal backing. Instead, the objective and system-questioning inquiry is, has the status and influence of these families inadvertently caused the speed and procedure of the investigation to unfold differently from standard cases? Does the caution of law enforcement stem from strict legal hurdles, or is there genuine influence from powerful connections? Is there concrete evidence showing that these relationships diverted or delayed the disclosure of key documents, such as post-mortem reports? It is the lack of a satisfactory answer from authorities that keeps the public constantly questioning the equality of justice when dealing with high-status individuals in society. Race and class. What if the roles were reversed? If we view this case through the lens of social critic D.L. Hughley, we cannot detach the human element from the broader picture. A young black man traveling with a group of affluent white peers, who then vanishes on a deserted island. This hits a raw nerve touching upon urban wounds surrounding race, socioeconomic status, and institutional power. Let's run a reversed scenario to question the judicial system's fairness. If this situation were reversed, a victim from a powerful family went missing, while those remaining on the boat were black youths with no elite connections or financial resources. Would the executive system's response proceed with the same pace and confidentiality? Would those who remained be allowed to freely return home without being detained for deep interrogation within the first 24 hours? Would post-mortem reports be tightly sealed under the open investigation label for weeks on end? We are not asserting that the system intentionally discriminated in this specific instance. Yet it is the disparity in real-world experiences that different communities have with law enforcement that makes this an investigative question that must be asked publicly and seriously. After all the debates over audio clips, attitudes, or family power, every investigative clue must ultimately return to the most reliable physical evidence, the victim's body. According to information highlighted on the D.L. Hughley Show, the independent post-mortem review sought by the family faced major hurdles when it could not immediately determine the exact cause of death. Notably, the public and experts have raised questions around the ability to thoroughly examine certain key anatomical structures, specifically soft tissue in the neck area, due to issues surrounding the handover of biological specimens from the state's initial examination. This ambiguity brings us right back to the core initial question regarding Nolan Wells's death. In what state did Nolan enter the water? Was it a voluntary act of jumping in to swim? A tragic slip-and-fall accident in the dead of night? Or was there external interference being forced or pushed overboard from the boat? Every tear, every drop of water in the lungs, or the presence or absence of bruising on the body carries decisive meaning. The victim's body cannot speak up on its own to recount the full story of what transpired. But forensic science is the sole tool that helps investigators determine which scenario actually fits the physical evidence. The case of Nolan Wells is no longer simply a story about a fateful trip to Horn Island. It has become a major test for the transparency of the legal system. From sealed post-mortem reports and the baffling disappearance of key biological evidence to the unusually cold responses from those closest to him, everything points toward an unsettling wall of silence. Is this silence a necessary operational procedure serving the investigation, or is it a shield covering for hidden powers in the background? While justice has yet to find an official answer, it is the concern and voice of the community that will serve as the guiding light, ensuring the truth is not buried in oblivion. What do you think is the real reason the post-mortem report is being kept secret? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below to join the discussion. Hit like if you found this video offered valuable perspectives. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the latest updates and our upcoming details.